Right now. All right, everyone. I'm so glad that you're joining this evening for our second CyberGuide live chat of the year. It's really great to have you all here. And my name is Lauren. You might have heard me talking in live chats before, maybe from last year, and I work with eCYBERMISSION. And so I'm joined this evening by some really amazing cyber guides. Cyber guides are STEM professionals, so they have STEM careers and they volunteer with eCYBERMISSION, and they're able to help us out with some STEM questions. So the first cyber guide I have joining this evening is Aiden Relay. So glad that you're able to join. If you wouldn't be able to say hello and maybe tell us what you do, we would love to hear from you.
Hi, good evening, everybody.
Hi.
Ellie, I'm a physician by training. I'm into clinical trials at the moment. So for the past 5 years, I've been doing more of clinical trials. And I work with Premier Research as a medical monitor. And what we do is we monitor all the data from different clinics where we're doing our research to make sure that the research is done in an ethical way and that we're able to get good data and data with integrity to be able to make a rational decision on whether the medication can work for what we are trying to use it for. And when we are done with that, we submit it to the FDA for approval. For example, like the COVID vaccine, I was part of the team that was doing that at the site level. And so we monitor all those safety issues to be sure it's safe for humans to use. And that's basically what I do. Thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing your expertise. We're really excited to have you as a cyber guide this year. I think we have one other cyber guide on tonight, cyber guide Daniel. Can you hear us okay? Maybe the audio isn't working right, but we do have a few other cyber guides this evening to hear from. And mostly we're just going to be talking about
oh, sorry.
Hey, can you hear us okay?
Hi, Lauren. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining. Cyber Guide Daniel, would you be able to tell us what you do and a little bit about your job?
Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Odio. I'm a civil engineer by profession, and I'm based in Columbus, Ohio. Currently, I'm working on quite some few infrastructure development, like airport project and road project.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for hopping on. I really appreciate that. Everybody who's just joined, feel free to put questions or comments in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. And for those of you that are just joining for our first live chat, we are going to be talking about IRBs this evening. So I'll tell you a little bit about what that is. And again, my name is Lauren, and I'm eCYBERMISSION staff member. So if you joined us 2 weeks ago, we went over a little bit about what the mission folder is. And today we're actually going to be diving in a little deeper on how to get started with your project safely. So a quick recap from last time. For eCYBERMISSION, your mission objective is to create a project that helps your community, either using engineering design or scientific inquiry. So your mission is to create a project with a lot of community benefit. So if you've ever wanted to change the world, you've come to the right place, and you can start in your own backyard with your teammates. So today we're just going to talk about some competition rules and ways to make sure that your team can get started safely on your project. So a little overview of the competition rules. We have a few changes this year that affect you guys. So you can actually form a team of just 2 people this year. That's new, but your teams can have anywhere from 2 to 4 participants. And you can also be in different grades. So for example, if you have a team of 3 people and 2 people are in 6th grade and 1 person's in 7th grade, you can still be on a team and compete. You'll just compete at the 7th grade level. You'll kind of go to that highest grade level on the team for your competition rank. You'll need to register to compete in the same state as your school, and students can only compete for 1 state. So just focus on being on 1 team for now. So as you get started, there's a few forms that are required for all of your teams in order to qualify. And I see we've got a raised hand. Does someone have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. As of right now, where should our team be? Like, should we have picked out our project topic already, or?
That's a great question. You know, it really just depends. There's really not a timeline that you need to follow. So I'd say if you haven't chosen your topic yet, but you're still brainstorming, you're in a good spot. Registration for teams opened about a month and a half ago, and that's a long time to brainstorm, but there's no requirement as to what you have to have accomplished by now. So I think you're in a good place. There's some resources that I'm going to share towards the end that show some great spots where you can get ideas for your project too. And so if you ever feel stuck or need some inspiration, we've got some resources to help you out.
Okay, I also have another question about the actual competition. It's all going to be virtual this year, right?
Yes, so that's a virtual STEM competition. You'll actually submit your project virtually, and it'll be reviewed virtually as well. We have not yet announced if we're going to have the national event be virtual or in person. We'll just have to wait until a little closer to June to know that for sure. But in the meantime, everything else is virtual up through April.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great questions. If there's any other questions, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat, and we'll make sure those questions get addressed. So for the risk assessment, basically before your team starts testing, you're going to actually fill out a form that you can find near your mission folder. This is a required form for all teams. You've got to fill it out before you start testing or building your prototype, just to make sure that your project is safe. And when you submit your folder in March, this form is submitted with that folder. And if you don't have it, your team will be disqualified. So it's a really important form. And in a moment, I'll show you exactly where to find it. Jose, you have your hand up. What can we help you with?
Yes, I would just like to know, because me and my team, we were wondering, because the topic is only invertebrates and vertebrate, right?
Nope. So that's just the theme of today's chat. I'll explain.
Oh yeah, because we're already creating a prototype. My team and I we've already created we drew out a prototype in class, and we're gonna discuss about it on a Google meeting and a Zoom, we don't know. And we're gonna discuss about it, and maybe we can do some. We have 2 ideas, and we're trying to make 2 ideas for different scenarios.
That sounds perfect. Yeah, you can absolutely do that. So the vertebrates and invertebrates that I'm going to talk about tonight, it's not a requirement for your mission folder.
Oh.
It's just a fun fact. So I'll cover it in a minute, but you're good to keep working on that prototype.
Okay, thanks.
Great question. All right, so I want to show you guys where to find the risk assessment form. If you are, let's see, I'll stop my share for just a moment while I access that. And I'll start it up again right now. Okay, so when you sign on to eCYBERMISSION.com and you have a complete team, you have a team advisor, and you're fully registered, you'll see an option to manage your mission folder. And if you don't see that online yet, that's okay. That just means that your team advisor will need to do a few more steps in order to complete your team registration. But once you are a fully complete team, you'll see this little tab here. There's little yellow tabs at the top, kind of like a folder. That's the mission folder. It's basically a series of questions that you answer, either about engineering or science. In where you can find all the forms, you can go to the verification tab right here, and you can find those forms already in there for you. Or you can look at resources right here on the side. And along the side where the resources are, you can find the risk assessment form, which is the one I was just mentioning. So all of those are really easy to find. You just need to log into your student account, be fully registered, and click on Manage Mission folder. And you can find all of those resources right there. So that risk assessment form basically just lets us know that you've thought through your safety of your project. So if you're going to be playing with a lot of fire, maybe rethink that. We're just wanting to make sure that your project is safe and that you will need to fill that out before you get started. All right, so the topic of tonight, though, is about vertebrates and invertebrates. So what on earth does that have to do with the mission folder? Don't worry, we're almost there. So on that same resources tab that I just showed you, there was a form called an IRB form. Now the IRB form is not required unless your project meets a few different criteria. So let's figure out if your team needs to complete an IRB form. But first, what on earth is an IRB? That's a great question. So basically an IRB stands for Institutional Review Board. Sounds like a really intense process for sure. But basically, it's a group of people who review proposed testing that will be part of a study. So it could be a science experiment or an engineering project. And this IRB, or Institutional Review Board, that group of people, they basically decide whether something is safe for people or animals. And this only includes testing on vertebrates, so animals with backbones. Some IRBs are formed by colleges or universities. Others are formed by institutes like the Institute of Health, but all of them include people like doctors, scientists, and educators who can figure out if the test that you're going to do is safe. Now, the thing about this is you only need to submit an IRB form if you're going to be testing on humans or vertebrates, animals with backbones. So the IRB form that we have online for you under resources, it basically will collect the signatures from 3 professionals who review your team's project to make sure it's safe. Will the form save if we close it? That's a great question. I believe that the forms are downloadable. So I think you'll need to download them to fill them out. That's a fantastic question. You could test it out, but I'm pretty sure you'll need to download those and then re-upload them. Okay, so the IRB, again, it's a group of people that make sure that project is safe. For eCYBERMISSION, it's only required if your project involves either human research, which could include something like a survey, or behavioral studies or experiments, or of course, any tests on people. The obvious part here is we're testing on humans. Humans are vertebrates. IRBs are also required if your experiment doesn't involve humans, but involves vertebrate animal research. So any vertebrate animal testing that your project is doing, you'll need an IRB. This is really for any animal with a backbone. And if you're doing behavioral studies on animals or experiments on animals in any way that have backbones, you'll need this form as well. All right, so we have a question in the chat. Just walking around a certain area considered testing if we could slip and fall? No, that doesn't include testing. If there's an area where there's a potential that you could slip and fall, obviously be really careful, bring an adult with you, but that's covered under the risk assessment form that's required for all teams. So you would not need an IRB for that. Really, you just need that IRB form if you're going to be having humans fill out surveys, if you're going to be doing any sort of human behavioral studies or experiments, or actually testing something on a human. All right. Same goes for those vertebrate animals. So vertebrate animals include, fish, they include mice, rats, any mammal, any bird, they all have backbones. So just be careful with those experiments. You'll need to fill out those forms if this qualifies for your team before you start those tests. Now I want to give our cyber guide a moment to chat with us. Aiden Relay, have you had experience with IRBs or either being on one to review a project or submitting a project to an IRB before?
Yes, I have not been on any IRB, but we have submitted projects to IRBs because we deal with human research. So before you can start any research, you need to first submit your, we call it protocol, but it can be like your research plan in the late term, in which you tell them why or the rationale for doing the research, what you're planning to achieve, the kind of people you'll be interviewing or doing experiments on. And of course, there's special consideration for children, for people that are incarcerated, for people that cannot give consent themselves. So those ones are given special consideration, but generally, if you're going to be using human, either testing something on them or even behavioral studies, you need an IRB approval, and they have to look at your plan and every material you're going to use, they need to see it first to be able to give you an approval. All they do is mainly to make sure it's safe for you to do all those experiments in humans. So they are kind of protecting humans from whatever experiment you're doing to make sure it's not going to cause any harm. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And this is something that scientists and engineers do all the time in the real world with their jobs. So it's a really important thing to be aware about. And for eCYBERMISSION purposes, if your project does involve testing on a vertebrate animal or testing on humans, the people that you'll need to have look at the project and sign the form include a school administrator. So this could be a principal, an assistant principal, maybe a curriculum developer, someone who works at a school. And then you'll need a doctor or a medical professional to sign the form as well. This could include your school nurse. And then you'll need a STEM educator to sign that form too. And this is key. It needs to be someone other than your team advisor. So those are the 3 signatures that you need on the form if you're doing any vertebrate animal or human testing. And do we have a question? Yes, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. For the STEM educator, and it's someone other than your team advisor, can it be your cyber guide? Because doesn't every team need a cyber guide?
So cyber guides are volunteers who actually volunteer with eCYBERMISSION, and they're not a requirement for students. So you can definitely talk to a cyber guide if you need help, but you're not automatically going to be assigned a cyber guide. So for the STEM educator, it actually needs to be a school teacher. So someone from your school other than your team advisor.
Thank you.
That's a fantastic question. If you can't find anyone to sign the form, so if you, obviously we are virtual these days, some of us are hybrid, some of us are not in person as much. And so what you can do is you can have the form digitally signed too. If you can't actually get a physical signature, the digital signatures are just fine. And if you can't find people to sign the form, I would ask your team advisor for assistance with that, because they'll be able to find a school administrator or maybe the school nurse or another teacher that can help you guys out. Great questions. All right, we have another raised hand. Go ahead.
I have a question. Me and my team, we're gonna be doing I think we're gonna be doing something that has to do with we're trying to create some kind of machine that would, purify water, and we're trying to see, would that count like as a something medical? Because would that count as anything medical?
So it would if you're actually going to be testing your prototype, like
Our
going
prototype,
out.
see if it can actually purify water.
Yeah, if you actually ingest it, if you ingest that water based on your
Oh.
purifier, then it would count as a medical human test. But if you're just going to be measuring, sediment in the water and doing a visual test of it, then you won't need to fill out that form.
Okay. Okay.
I know
Thank
it's kind of that fine line. If you are going to be like putting anything on your skin or
No.
ingesting anything, you'll need that form. But if you're just going to be visually observing, you don't need it.
We just agreed, everybody at class, we're not gonna ingest anything. We're just gonna, because I have a microscope, we're gonna see if there's any sediment in the water.
That's
So
perfect. That's a great way to proceed. I love that.
nobody
And-
putting nobody in like danger, so, well, not danger, but putting somebody in risk of not having a good stomach.
Exactly. That's definitely important. And that's why we have these forms, to make sure that these experiments and tests are safe. So good job. I love that you're thinking about safety already as you get started.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so if you are going to be testing on humans in any way, especially if you're having a group of people even fill out a survey, the IRB might determine that your test subjects need to sign a consent form. So if those test subjects are going to be, putting anything on their skin or ingesting anything or filling out a behavioral survey, they might need that form. And that's also on that same page I showed you under resources in your mission folder. So you'll see that right here, IRB and approval form, risk assessment form, and then we have some other forms in there too. So there's also one in here too called the potentially hazardous biological agents form. And this one is obviously not used that often, but just in case you're going to be using any sort of acid or any sort of chemical in your test, you'll need to fill out that form too. All right, we've got another question in the chat here. I love all these questions. How long does the IRB usually take to respond? That's a good question. Generally, it doesn't take too long. I would say maybe 2 weeks. But if your team is having, a deadline to begin testing, you would need to communicate that to whoever is signing the form. Like, hey, we need this form by X date because we want to start testing, the next week. So you can kind of decide the timeline for that. But typically, since it's just a signature, it would take no longer than a week or two for the IRB to respond. If it's 2 weeks before mission folder submission, which is March 2nd, and you wanted to do a last minute test, so you hadn't done any testing leading up to mission folder submission, but maybe 2 weeks before you wanted to do a test, that's okay. Since you haven't started testing yet, you can still get that form signed before you test. The key is just having it reviewed prior to actually testing what you're wanting to test on people or vertebrate animals. So if you have any last minute things that you want to try, maybe think about if you could do it next year, maybe you could try it out next year. But if you really want to try something out last minute, just make sure those forms are signed prior to beginning testing. So I showed you where to find those forms in your mission folder. You're actually going to go again to that mission folder, manage mission folder tab. You'll find them all on the side here under resources, but you can also find them in another spot. So if you go to competition rules, maybe if your team hasn't fully completed registration yet, and you don't see that mission folder tab, you can find all those forms under the rules tab of the website under section 6, mission folder safety, risk assessment, and IRB forms. So I'll put that link in the chat in case anyone hasn't had access to their mission folders yet, you can still kind of look over those rules and find those forms. All right, so we've talked a lot about those risk assessments, the IRBs. The human informed consent form is basically if you're doing a survey to just get permission from the people who are filling out the survey. Those forms you can find online too. But if you're wondering where to start, and maybe you haven't gotten that far yet to think about your actual experiment or prototype, check out the inspiration station. So I'll show you where that is. That's on our website. If you go to students, and then you go to the help center, there is a, let's see, there it is, inspiration station right here. And I'll put the link directly to it in the chat. It's a great spot where you can go and just look through different resources and get ideas. There's also a spot called selecting a topic. This isn't a document that you can edit, but you can actually kind of share this with, maybe make a copy of it and share it with your team in Google. And you can brainstorm and get ideas for how to have a project that helps your community. So we definitely have spots where you can go to get some ideas and resources if you're still in that planning stage. Questions so far? I know we've had a lot of questions. I've covered a lot in 30 minutes. If you have any more, this is a perfect time. All right. Well, great. I'm so glad that you're here tonight. I do want to mention our cyber guides are on tonight as well. And our cyber guides are our STEM professionals. They're actually engineers and scientists and medical professionals who volunteer to answer questions about STEM. So we have cyber guides all over the US. So we have a few online with us this evening, but if you are interested in asking a question related to STEM, so science, technology, engineering, or math, if you have one of those questions and you want to ask a cyber guide, you can connect with them on Cronus. And Cronus is basically an app where you can see cyber guides, you can see what they do, what their profession or career is, and you can kind of decide who you want to talk to. And you can send them a message with a question. Hey, I have a question about my prototype design. And they can answer those questions for you on this app. So there's also a spot, and I'm going to show you right now. There's also a spot where you can go. If you maybe don't have a specific question yet to ask the cyber guide, you can actually go to the Cronus forum as well. So the forum is under the community tab. This is a spot where you can go to ask general eCYBERMISSION questions, or you can even find the forums. We have one for each grade level. So there's a 6th grade forum, 7th grade forum, 8th and 9th. This is just where you can go to post some questions, see who's in Cronus, see what's going on. And next Wednesday, we're actually going to be hanging out for an hour, same time, 7 to 8 Eastern. We'll be hanging out in the chat here of Cronus, and we can just answer questions in real time. So no webcams, no Zoom meeting. We're just going to be hanging out in that app next week at 7 o'clock Eastern time. We'll be talking a little bit about 3D printing and prototypes, but any questions you have, you can bring to us next Wednesday. So I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the chat for emailing me actually. So if you want access to Cronus and you are an eCYBERMISSION student, you can email volunteerprogram@eCYBERMISSION.com and I'll walk you through setting up your profile. So if anybody is interested in connecting with other teams or cyber guide volunteers, that email address, volunteer program, is where you'll go to get further instructions on Cronus. But it's a really cool app. You can use it on the computer or your Chromebook. You can download it on your phone, but it's basically just a messaging platform where everyone who's in there is going to be with eCYBERMISSION. So it's pretty cool. So that's next week. We've got the Cronus Forum Hangout. Again, that one doesn't have a Zoom link or anything. It's just going to be, we're hanging out in the forums on the app. But in 2 weeks, we have another live chat. It's going to be Wednesday, October 20th, same time, 7 to 8 Eastern. And we're actually going to have some scientists, engineers talking about what they do every day. So it's going to be a day in the life of a scientist or engineer. So if you want to learn a little bit more about STEM careers and meet some awesome cyber guides, join us in 2 weeks. We don't do a meeting every week. The cyber guide live chats are every other week. And then next week is just kind of a Cronus Forum hangout. We're doing those like 3 times in the whole year. So, but every other week we have cyber guide live chats. So I just want to thank you guys for joining. Thank you, cyber guides, for hopping on. I'll be here for a few more minutes if anyone has any questions, but I really appreciate you joining and good luck on your projects. I know that you guys are going to change the world this year.